So you've got a lot of stuff going on. A lot of our listeners might be like, well, that's amazing. However, right now I'm just trying to figure out how to make my first dollar online. Could you take us back to before you ever started this? What was the trigger that started this? What were you doing before you ever got into any kind of online business?
I mean, transparently, this is all I've ever done. So I'm very lucky in the sense that I come from a entrepreneurial family. My grandpa was an entrepreneur, my dad was an entrepreneur. So I got this really unique perspective in what life is like as a business owner entrepreneur. It's very unusual. Most entrepreneurs don't have that, right? They just kind of figure it out on their own and they think I'm just going to do this. So I really knew from an early age that like this is my path. I didn't know exactly what it would be, right? I didn't know what market it would be, what industry it would be, what the idea would be, but I knew like I'm going to build my own thing and I'm going to make my own path and I can't do the 9 to 5 thing. Now, of course, like high school, college, I worked the typical crappy jobs, right? I think it's important to actually have those, working
Mm.
14-hour days at a deli and things like that. I think it builds character. But starting in college, started my first company my senior year in college and haven't looked back since. It was a event. We did the venture back tech thing. So it was a software company, raised a good amount of money around it, ran that for 2.5 years, ended up failing. And that's a whole podcast on just failure. And I think all things that are broken on Silicon Valley model and focusing on growth at all costs and not revenue. But towards the tail end of that, I was like, this is really stressful. Building a tech startup where your bank account balance goes one way every day for years is really, really stressful, where you just need to keep raising money to keep going. And so towards the end of that, I started hearing about, it's about 12 years ago, I started hearing about this, drop shipping thing, and Facebook ads were just really starting, and Shopify and all this stuff was just really starting to enter the kind of early adopter awareness sphere. And so I was like, I remember meeting a buddy of mine. I was like, he told me about this way to do t-shirts and print on demand where you could like sell t-shirts, but not actually order them and you can just send them right to the customer. And I was like, that sounds really cool. So I started my first e-commerce store. It was called Startup Drugs. And it was basically an apparel brand, t-shirt brand that we just poked fun at entrepreneurship. It was like none of the hard, it was like there was some inspirational, motivational brands. We were like the anti. We were all like, burning VC cash like it's my job. We were doing, it was like fun stuff, right? That entrepreneurs got. And it did really well. And it was a really cool experience. It kind of tapped me into Facebook ads as a growth there. We had customers like the Miami Dolphins placed orders. That's the first time I met Russell Brunson. Russell bought a bunch of stuff. I actually ended up selling the business to Russell. Russell owns it now. And it gave me a really unique perspective into e-commerce, digital marketing. And that's where I started Facebook ads. Flash forward a few years into that, I met my current partner, Jeremy, and he was doing a deal with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. And as seen on TV, the infomercial that he invented and just sold $6 billion on TV. And Kevin was just starting to build his digital presence and was like, hey guys, I get all this deal flow and you guys are the marketing guys. Like, what if we started an agency together? So we started a company called Quantum Media. We ran that for 2 years, multi-office, full service agency, worked with the 3Ms and Sam's Clubs of the world, also worked with dozens and dozens of product companies that Kevin would invest in, Shark Tank style companies. And that really put me down the path of, direct response marketing, digital marketing, paid ads. It also gave me a peek behind kind of the content side of it, the personal brand side of it through Kevin, got to see the power of a personal brand. That's when we met, Grant Cardone and guys like that. When 10X GrowthCon was first starting, Kevin spoke there. So really got to see a lot of these guys as Grant was already kind of big, Kevin was big, but like really see them early on this massive growth spike. And then I've known them for years since then. And I've over those last 8 years since starting Quantum, now with Unicorn, we started 5 years ago, I've gotten to meet and get to build relationships with pretty much all the biggest people in the industry and see how integral personal brand and content was in being successful, and knew is like, hey, I need to start doing this, right?
Got it.
You can't separate the two.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've seen a lot of people who've gone into agency work and just stayed there. What do you think is different about you? Because you seem to, like, you told me about how you started a business, sold it, started another one, exited it, sold a business to Russell Brunson. Why do you think some people start one business, stick with it forever, and there's a difference between those kind of people and you who starts it, sells it, or develops into something?
I think agencies, the reason why a lot of people get stuck in agencies is they can become a trap in that it's a really easy business to start. Probably one of the best businesses. I recommend a lot of young kids when they come to me and say, like, what should I do? I said, well, starting an agency is probably the easiest thing to start because it requires basically no money. You can just be good at something and you charge money for it. And it's a really easy way to get to 10K a month of income. Really, 2K a month per client, you get 5 clients, and that's pretty easy. You got a 120K a year business and you can pretty much fulfill that on your own. The challenge is a lot of people get into this and they don't have a clear path of where they want to go. And they also have lifestyle creep. They don't invest in teams. They don't basically keep everything to themselves. So they don't build teams. They don't bring in leadership. And you get to a point where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, but this is my only source of income. I can't sell it because agencies are very hard to sell. All that's changing. Some of my buddies, like Tom Shipley, is running this really great agency accelerate roll up model. That's pretty interesting, but it's still pretty hard to sell. And if you sell it, it's not going to get a great multiple. And there's an earnout and lots of other things where you're still going to be working on it probably for a year or 2 years. So they get trapped and there's no exit plan. So with us, it was like, one, we had this great boot camp with Kevin, getting to spend 2 years with Kevin and travel with him and be with him and be in all these deals and see the way he runs his business was incredibly beneficial and was a very unique experience. And so we got to see this thing where it's like, okay, this guy gets pieces of all these companies. He's in all these deals. And it's because he's built his expertise, his influence, his clout, his authority, and he's leveraging his relationship capital, his network, his authority to get pieces of deals. And he's not doing the day-to-day work. He's either just getting a piece of a company or he's getting teams into other companies. And that was the big aha moment for us was like, okay, we need to start building teams. We need to start treating these not just like cash flow business, but real businesses. Because it's like once you get to a few million a year, you need to start being like, this is a real business. We can't run it like we ran when we were running 100,000 a year, 500,000 a year, a million a year. It just changes. And so all of our companies now have CEOs, they have C-suite, they have teams, they have HR, they have infrastructure. And so if I'm not there day to day, the business still runs, still advise them, and still some of them are more active at different times, but they're real businesses. And that allows us to, if we want to sell a business, it's more sellable. If we want to go do something else, we can go do that because there's infrastructure there. And that was really the big differentiator. And most people just don't build that and they get trapped.